Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Rabbi Michael Klayman. I am the rabbi of the Lake Success Jewish Center. From my Jewish heritage, I inherited a wise teaching, which I believe has universal application during this turbulent era of American and global history. It is not incumbent on you to complete the task, but neither are you free to desist from it. Responsibility for social justice, equality, tolerance, and mutual respect does not fall in the hands of any one individual. Alone, we cannot cure all the social ills plaguing our society. It is incumbent, however, upon each of us to engage in the struggle and to contribute our efforts and our passions toward reducing and eliminating the schisms which divide us so deeply. Our recent national election highlights the grave divisions within our society. The polarization within our Congress and governing bodies often precludes the possibility of any effective legislation benefiting our nation in its entirety. As individuals, we become entrenched in our views, obdurate when it comes to considering any conflicting opinion. We react with hostility to alternative points of view. In terms of intolerance and mutual disrespect, our local community often serves, or occasionally serves, as a microcosm of the national scene. Racism and intolerance deprive us of the beauty and the joy which diversity contributes to any community, large or small. Our conversation over the next hour brings together in dialogue several people representative of our town and our county and community. Each participant, through his/her service, has enriched the community, and we will all share some constructive ideas and healthy observations. We are not here for an election or for any ulterior motive other than to offer a pre-Thanksgiving opportunity to speak freely and unrehearsed, offering some candid thoughts about the present and visions about the future. We are here not to demand or to expect consensus, but rather to further conversation with the objective that this dialogue will be the first of many and will expand far beyond the parameters of one television program. We hope everyone will listen with open eyes, open ears, and open hearts. Several people expressed regret at not being able to participate tonight, but we are very honored by those who are here with us for this dialogue. I want to just briefly introduce everyone. Laura Curran, Nassau County Executive; Judi Bosworth, Town Supervisor of North Hempstead; Ellen Birnbaum, our county legislator from Nassau; Rebecca Sassouni, representing SHAI, and also is a member of the Great Neck Board of Education; Jane Zhang from the Great Neck Chinese Association; Andre Vanderpool, representing Manhasset High School basketball, but so much more in the activities within our community. So with those thoughts in mind, I'd like to just pose an initial question and then open it up to everyone for response. The increasing diversity of our local community, I believe, is a source of strength, and I know you share those sentiments. Yet we've been plagued by incidents of intolerance and racism here within our own community. So beyond the surface, how do you each envision or continue to envision addressing these disturbing trends? I'd like to first ask our Nassau County Executive.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for your beautiful introduction, for inviting me to come on. And it's so nice to see all of my friends in our Brady Bunch rectangles. Hopefully we can get together and do this sort of thing in person soon. So yes, we have a growingly diverse county, 1.3 million people, so many new people, immigrants coming, folks moving from New York City because people are leaving New York City. And it is so important that we have an attitude of warmth and of welcome for everyone from every community. I'll just give you a couple of examples of what we do on the county level, working with our partners at the town of North Hempstead, working with Judi Bosworth, working with our partners across municipal lines, villages, et cetera. So it was this year, it seems like a lifetime ago, in January, where because we had seen a real uptick in anti-Semitic graffiti and hate crimes, we decided we wanted to stand together as one county, one community against hate and against anti-Semitism. And we put the call out to all of the churches, to the mosques, to the school community, to as far and wide as we possibly could, and we organized a march against anti-Semitism. And it was it was January. It was actually a nice day, but you don't think you're going to get a lot of people. We got upwards of 2,500 people coming out to take that stand, to do the march. We had speakers from so many different communities, so many representations. And it was really inspiring to look out at the crowd and to see every color, every religion, every community represented with one voice to take a stand. And that gave me, to take a stand against hate, and that gave me a real feeling of optimism. So fast forward, we had COVID and all of that, very complicated, difficult times for all of our communities. We did see disparate impacts of COVID in our African-American community. So we made sure that we got testing in Freeport, in Hempstead, in Roosevelt, in Elmont. And then we saw the rates in those communities start to come down. We made sure that we had food distributions for the insecure, or made sure that we had help for small businesses that may have been passed over for PPP. So that was that, and again, coming together for the common good. Then fast forward a little more, you had the killing of George Floyd. And I think in Nassau County, we had about 260 protests, calling for police reform, calling for, greater trust. And we're responding to that call as well. And I have to point out, we had 260 protests, and we just had another one this weekend. No violence, no property damage, people exercising their First Amendment right. And, at the county, we're tasked with public safety. We've got the police department, we've got the jail, we've got the sheriffs. So we're working really hard. I feel like we have a good culture of trust between community and police, but it's something that we always strive to do better. We were just ranked safest county in the country by US News and World Report. It's my goal that every community feels that level of safety and feels that level of comfort. So, those are just a few things that come to the top of my head, but I don't want to dominate the conversation, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, as you were speaking, it reminded me of a WhatsApp message I received from Sheikh Wali from the Hillside Islamic Center. It was after a recent anti-Semitic activity. He wrote to me and said, "What are we going to do? We need to get together. We need to really speak out." And some of us on this discussion, and many other members of the community expressed solidarity with the Hillside Islamic Center following the attack on the mosques in New Zealand. So while we speak about incidents of racism and hate, there are also those moments when, as you said, we do get together, we do speak out with one voice in support of equality for everybody. I'm going to turn now to our two other legislators, first to Supervisor Bosworth and then Legislator Birnbaum.
Thank you, Rabbi Klayman. And thank you to Laura Curran, our county executive, for always finding exactly the right tone to strike. So I appreciate having the opportunity for us to get together, as you say, in a dialogue. Unfortunately, this is nothing new. It seems that we've been struggling with messages of hate and bigotry, not just now, but really for years. And I am particularly sensitive to it because my parents were Holocaust survivors. So I know how little it takes for people to rise up and turn against a group of people based on stereotypes, based on things that make no sense whatsoever. And I recall there were some, and this goes back a few years ago, there was some really strong anti-Semitic acts throughout Nassau County, in Mineola, in Port Washington, in Great Neck. And there was and I remember people coming to a town board meeting and saying, what are you going to do about this? And there were many dialogues that were taking place between temples and churches and mosques, but yet there was a sense, you're our elected leaders, what are you going to do about it? And I remember at the time we asked Steve Markowitz, who was the director of the Holocaust and Memorial Center, to come in and speak with us and share some ideas. And he did. And the first thing he mentioned was something called Not in Our Town. And I didn't even need to hear what it involved, because I thought to myself, that's what it is. Not in our town. This is not acceptable in our town. Racism, bigotry, prejudice has no place here. And so, in the ensuing years, we've seen Islamophobia. We've seen in Great Neck acts of aggression against some of our Chinese American residents. Certainly anti-Semitism is alive and well. And so there's a sense of having to view us as a family. We are a family, and doesn't mean we always get along together, because I'm sure each of you and your families, there are spats, there are differences, but the bottom line is we respect each other. We want to be together, and we want to stand together. And so I think that will probably be a recurring theme here this evening, and that's communicating, standing together, wanting to make sure that everyone's rights are respected. An act against one is an act against all. An act of prejudice against one is an act of prejudice against all of us, because you never know when you're going to be the targeted group. And the only way we can come out of this is by having dialogues such as this one, where we sit together, we stand together, whatever the occasion may be, and talk and try to find out what we can do to get that out, that we are a family, that we're here to work together, to respect each other, and to make life just a little bit better.
So beautifully expressed. Before I turn to Legislator Birnbaum, I want to recognize Erica Bradley, the Executive Director of North Shore TV. She's really the catalyst for this program and so instrumental in much taking place within this our greater area. So I appreciate her support and also her participation. Legislator Birnbaum.
Well, thank you for doing this, Erica, and thank you, Rabbi Klayman, for moderating this. I have to totally agree with what County Executive Laura Curran and Town Supervisor Judi Bosworth have said. As a longtime resident of this community, it does pain me when I hear about acts of intolerance. And I know it has been happening. It seems more frequently. But look, we live in a world of social media. Here we are on a Zoom conference, and where do we hear most of these comments? It's on social media. Somebody records it and it gets heard and it gets passed along, and everybody seems to have a comment following it. And that's a reality of our life nowadays. We hear it, we see it, there's videos taken. And yes, it's unfortunate that there are a few incidents where people say something and it's hurtful and it affects an entire community. Whereas maybe in the past, it would have just been in passing at an event and it wouldn't have been amplified like that. But nowadays, the way social media is, everybody eventually hears about it and has something to say about it. So we do live in a diverse community. And I personally think the response is one of education. It's learning about each other. It's not being afraid of people who aren't from the same ethnicity, of race, background. So Judi mentioned Steve Markowitz, who was the past leader at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. It does teach tolerance, but more than tolerance, I think, as you mentioned, Judi, it's respect. But in order to build that respect, we have to get to know each other. And I know at Temple Israel, Rabbi Schweber and the Great Neck Asian community the Chinese Association has planned events, and they've gotten together and learned about each other's holidays. And I've been to some of them, and it's so inspiring because people just didn't know. And when you don't know about other people and you're learning about other cultures, you really learn to respect other people like that. So if we are a community, one community, but made of different kinds of people, it is incumbent upon us to be able to learn about each other. And once we do that, I really think within the schools, within our churches and synagogues, within the town, within the county, yes, it's one thing to band together to show that we all stand for being fair and equal and just, but it's another thing to educate people and have people learn about each other, and that builds respect. So I think really that's the goal moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to now turn to our non-legislators, and pardon my informality, referring to you by first names, Andre, Rebecca, Jane, and Erica. Andre, please.
Hello. This is a very interesting and trying time where there are different opportunities for us to learn about diversity, but there's a level of discomfort that has to happen in order to get to those levels. In order to learn, there has to be more time spent outside of the march, outside of the, celebrations of holidays and things of that nature. It has to become a daily practice. So, how willing are people to there's going to be some resistance from your family members, some of your friends, on expressing your belief in your understanding of different cultures and different people, because we're unlearning some of the stories about our surrounding neighbors that aren't necessarily true and have changed with the times. Our new generation has a different experience of diversity that the older generation may not have, and it has a level of understanding where our children have more opportunities of sharing opportunities together. So there's going to be some necessary conversation in creating safe spaces such as this, and even for children and other families and parents to have conversation on levels of understanding. There has to be more listening to understand, and not to kind of be accepted, and understanding that you support these cultures, but also learning these cultures, learning what the issues are, what their concerns are, and how can you could be of not just assistance to them, but also sharing this information with your peers, your family, because a lot of times it's who the messenger is in delivering this information of understanding. So it's sometimes when you're at the dinner table talking with your family and friends, it may be much easier to start a conversation about learning about different cultures and minorities and diversity, as opposed from it coming from directly from the person who you kind of may be hesitant, maybe afraid of, whatever stereotypes that have been taught to us throughout the years, that it's hard to kind of just lay to the side because it's so embedded into us, into our cultures, into our habits to be separate. But this is a different time. It's a new day. It's a new opportunity. There are a lot of tools and avenues that we can use even during this time to educate one another. So I'm very interested and happy about being able to have more conversation, to have more time spent with one another, to understand, and opportunity to develop relationships, because that's the only way you do it, that you spend time together for understanding, not just on occasion. So I'm really looking forward, and I'm happy that that we're continuing this conversation.
I'm going to come back a little later. I'm sorry. I'm going to come back a little later. Go ahead.
Can I hop in? I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump on what Andre was saying. Andre, I have a question for you. Do you feel that children and kids, teenagers are more open to diversity, whether sexual, ethnic, racial, however? I work with kids a lot in my organization. We have kids coming through there, and I never really see any problem with these kids. They don't have any problem with each other. But when I hop on Facebook or in these moms groups, that's where I'm seeing the real problem. I'm seeing real bullying between adults. And they feel safe because they're behind the computer. They're like, we call them like the computer warriors, right? Because they say what they want to say and they feel brave behind the computers. But I don't see that with children, and at least maybe the kids that come through my facility. And I'm just wondering, because I know that you work with kids.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think?
It's very hard for people to be present. So many adults carry on their past experiences and relay it onto the children. Children are blank slates. So they learn the behaviors and the habits that we instill in them. So if you have a hesitation or a bias towards a certain group, that they're getting it from their surrounding environments. The children don't automatically come with hate or bigotry. It's learned. So if you're behind the computer and not allowing yourself to kind of change your experience, and we judge things as a whole. So I would relate it to, if you went to a restaurant and you ordered, the chicken, and you didn't like the chicken, you would say this restaurant isn't good. So you would judge the whole restaurant off of one experience, off of one meal. And we take that from years ago. So you have to understand that people don't address their trauma. They don't address the issues that they face. They carry it on with them and they pass it on to the children. And the children just act out what they know. So oftentimes I tell kids all the time, it's not that we don't like you, we don't appreciate you. That's not it at all. We may not enjoy your decision-making skills just based off the things that you learn because they didn't pick it up on their own.
You and Erica make very good points. One of the great challenges as a clergy person is speaking to people who come with preconceived ideas and notions. And my responsibility is to be able to minister to them and to speak to them in a way which, without being confrontational, but sometimes trying to redirect them and trying to have them understand that these preconceived notions just contribute to racism and a lack of understanding, and they get passed on and on. So I think all of us in our various occupations and professions at times are going to have to ask the difficult questions and have difficult conversations, not always easy. Rebecca?
Sure. I'm so fascinated listening to everyone's perspectives. I'm really enjoying this, Rabbi. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for your perspectives. I guess I have two notions that come to mind. The first has to do with what Legislator Birnbaum said about social media, and Erica just mentioned it also. So it's an amplifier, and that's the problem. But it's also a problem not just because of the negativity that people bring, but because there's actually lots of good things happening and we don't tend to hear about them. So I really don't think it's as doomy and gloomy between our children or between the adults as one might think reading the Great Neck Record or Facebook, which ends up being a source for Great Neck Record. I think that in the day-to-day amongst neighbors, things are actually better than they appear. And I can give some examples of that if I have time. Yes. But that's one thing. But the other really is, and I guess, so I'm here wearing my SHAI hat. SHAI is a not-for-profit organization that was founded in 1992 by Persian Jewish people who had moved to the United States after the Iranian Revolution and wanted to help other families coming to the United States acculturate and to succeed here. So providing tuition scholarships for kids who couldn't afford whether a Jewish day school education or a secular college or graduate situation, for example, helping the elderly who are aging in place because our culture doesn't support sending the elderly to assisted living. The elderly are at home with their family, and lots of programming that we do as well. So wearing my SHAI hat, I would observe, I'm a first generation American. I was born in the United States, although the organization serves often people who weren't born here. And what I see happening in Great Neck really is very American, is very much a microcosm of the national story, but it's also magnified here because what we have here in Great Neck are a lot of pluralities, a lot of ethnic groups that are new, they're first generation, not necessarily growing up with American civic values. New to that, I guess I would say provincial in thought for very good reasons, having to do with being new to a country, not knowing the norms, being fearful of losing family traditions, whether religious or ethnic, and having, in some cases or many, deep suspicion of others because of when trauma was referenced, because of whatever life was in the country that one left. So whether that's China or Iran or other countries where people were oppressed, and that's why they came here to escape different kinds of persecution, it's understandable why they're provincial, and it takes time for that to come out in the next generation. But what ends up happening in a place like Great Neck, where the pluralities are people who are minorities by every other definition in America, you know, that becomes a very interesting mix. So, I mean, if you read the news, you know that Asian American students are involved in a lawsuit against Ivy League schools for not having favorable admission policies that are possibly anti-Asian. But also we know locally that our Asian kids especially are being targeted and blamed for the coronavirus in an unseemly way. So on the one hand, there are a majority in many schools, right, are Asian American students. They could be the majority of the residents in any given street or, you know, village, and yet feeling and being targeted as a minority. And similarly for Persian Jewish people, as well as for Ashkenazi Jewish people, et cetera, we are minorities. We are sensitive to issues having to do with anti-Semitism, and yet we're a very tiny minority of the world population and the United States population.
So what are the
What
challenges
becomes
you're finding in
interesting,
schools?
pardon?
What are the challenges you're finding within the school system?
So it's exactly. So it's fascinating in the school context too, because on the one hand, public education is by definition blind to all of these things, right? It's for fairness purposes, it's available to everyone. And at the same time, the needs arise. So our educators, our social workers, our guidance counselors, our school building administrators, and members of the board are all very mindful of how this intersection between ethnicity and race and being a first generation American, as well as I omitted poverty. We have a huge rise in students who qualify for free and reduced meals over the last number of years, even before coronavirus. There are serious needs in this community, and public education really is tasked with trying to level the playing field. The only other thing I would add, and it's a little provocative, but I'll just say it, wearing my SHAI experience and my SHAI hat. So for instance, over the last number of years, as Legislator Birnbaum said, we have at SHAI made a concerted effort to reach beyond just the Persian Jewish community, but also to extend a hand to others in the community and to work for common purpose. So whether it's with the Chinese Association, or also if for celebration of, say, Martin Luther King Day, and using it as a day, what we call a day on, not a day off, so that students could learn about the legacy of Dr. King and about prejudice. there's always backlash to everything. And so when you try to do something good, but because of social media or just people's provincialism, there's backlash. So whether it's attending a Martin Luther King event on what was 1 year Tu B'Shvat, which is a minor Jewish holiday, I, for one, just for putting together that event, I was bashed literally by a local rabbi on Shabbat from from the lectern, named me, tried to shame me for why am I and the organization SHAI speaking about Dr. King's legacy when we should be speaking about the 10 Commandments and Moses on a Jewish holiday. You just can't win. But I'm sharing that story because really that was his provincialism. He's a footnote. What matters is that year we had 75 students who had a day off from school and still attended and learned from the ADL and from SHAI and from Temple Beth El and Temple Israel and from some of our local churches as well, what it is to be an American student living in a very pluralistic community. And what could be better? So, you take your lumps, that's all.
Tu B'Shvat is a holiday focused on trees, and trees represent growth. What better symbolism than growth within ourselves in recognizing the kind of community in which we live and honoring Dr. King and other people who have so enriched our society. I'd like to turn now to Jane and then to Erica.
Hi, yeah, thank you to having me here. And it's really a great event that everybody can talk. We have a conversation to share our experience. And I totally agree with everyone. So communication is one of the most important thing to do, because a lot of incidents, from my point of view, it's really not based on a true fact. So people just hear a piece of word from here or there, story from somewhere, just make up their judgment, say, oh, you are bad because I heard from here, there. But actually, whether it's true or not many people really look into it. So that's, I think, communication is not just from the social media, and especially for the local organizations, we can always have some event to let people sitting together, talking about their story, to see what other people think in real life here in Great Neck area, about what's happening here. I agree with Rebecca that it's not always bad thing happen. Also, a lot of good news and good information is exchanging everywhere. Recently, as a Chinese association, we heard a lot of stories like Chinese kids or even adults got attacked because of coronavirus. And it's showed on the social media or showed on the newspaper. And it's not just that. We always got support from the town, from the county, from the local organization. On the first time, they sent a message, oh, we are together with you. This is not a we tolerant. So actually, I'm personally very touched about all those informations. Those news is not spreading out. Usually the bad news spreading out so fast. So as a member of the Chinese Association, I always say we should have a letter to thank for all the organizations, thanks for town, thanks for county. We got all the support. This is the positive information show to the community. So what our value stand together. We cannot beat by all those incidents, say, oh, our town is so bad, our county is so bad. It's not true. Those bad incidents is not tolerated by any of the groups. And we have the common value. They have nowhere to go. So that's what I think we need to talk. We need the communication. So we not just look at the bad side, we also look at the good side. And also the communication is, I think a lot of people, it's just their lack of the information, like how the other country, how the other culture works, and they are not really talking to them. So they just like Andrew said, oh, because parents said so, because my friend says so, because this or that. But what is really happened? So Chinese Association, we set up events trying to collaborate with the local Jewish community. We have the like a social connection. We have ice skating events before. We have swimming events before, and we have the book discussion. So they always during all those events, we have the opportunity to sitting together. We talk to each other. Oh, what's your story? What's his story? I think by all doing this, like if you have a Chinese friend is very friendly in your real life, you might change the idea. Oh, what is Chinese as a whole could be, right? I believe in Chinese, inside of Chinese community, they are always also have different opinion. That's also is our organization want trying to do. We sit together. If you have concern about like within the community, within the Chinese community, or you have concern about like other organizations, let's talk out. Let's figure out what's the problem. I don't like personally, that's my personal opinion. I don't like to hide those concerns by yourself. Over time, it will accumulate, generate a bigger problem. So whenever you have some concern, if you are not comfortable to talk to in person to the other people, we can talk in different way. Let's discuss. So make it more clear. I don't like the same just by rumors, or I don't talk to you about it, I don't like you, but I talk to other people. The other people pass the word and pass the word. By the end, everything changed. Even you don't know what's exactly the original problem is. So this, I think this is something like within the organization, we try to help the Chinese people to have their way to vent out. Like when the kids got attacked, when the adults got attacked, a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable to talk to other people. Oh, this happened, that happened. So as a GNCA, we represent them. So let us know. So we can help them to talk with the school or talk with the county to see how to deal with. And we arrange an event, I think the last month or 2 months ago, to helping the parents also know when you are your kids or even yourself facing this kind of situation, how to deal with that. So you have to have a right way to handle this. It's not like I got hate behave, so I hate back. It's not the right way to solve the problem. Hate never solves the problem. So I think it's all these things just to get work together with the county, with the town, with the school district. So we are trying to find the best way when you feel not comfortable, how to deal with it, how to let it go, or how to like the whole whole environment, whole the community to educate each other.
We have to live without this atmosphere of fear, which prevents people from feeling open to talk. And ignorance and misinformation need to be addressed incrementally. So I think the work that you've described, even in small groups, overcoming ignorance has to be done sometimes gradually, step by step. And I think it's wonderful what the Chinese Association has contributed. Erica, as a representative of not just the media, but someone who really does have a pulse on the entire community.
Thanks. So, I've been working here at NSTV for 20 years. So I've seen the neighborhood change. I can't even believe I said that, but yeah, I've seen the neighborhood grow in different ways. And I've actually had the pleasure of only really getting the good out of all of the different types of people that are in the neighborhood, right? Because we work with all different organizations. And so I've been able to see the friendliness, the openness of everybody. And so that's why I wanted to, when I see things in the news and when I hear rumors and when I see things on social media, that's not the neighborhood that I know. That's not the people that I know, and I want everybody to try to learn and know each other like I know everybody. And that's where I think also Rabbi Klayman is coming from with this as well. Don't mean to put words in your mouth, but there seems to be a fear. And then there also seems to be a defense mechanism that happens. So people don't want to be told that they're not seeing things properly, or they're not listening, or maybe they're not understanding right. And I think that with platforms like this, we'll hopefully get people to be a little bit more open-minded, to try to learn more about each other, about your neighbor. Because in the end of the day, what are we all trying to do? Make a living, raise our kids, go to the grocery store, go to bed. You know, that's all. We're all doing the same thing. That's all we're trying to do. We're all living. And, you know, we may be doing a little bit different ways, but, you know, that's all we are. We're all the same, you know. So I just feel that forums like this are important, and hopefully it doesn't just end here though. So I mean, we've had many of these forums, and then it's cyclical, right? So then all of a sudden we're back talking about some kind of prejudice. We're back, there's some kind of event that's brought this conversation back. So I think it's important for us to try to figure out a way to stop that cycle.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what to me has been what's most disturbing about the recent election, it's not just the fact that our country is almost divided in half, but the fact that one half refuses to, not only refuses to listen, but the level of intolerance, the level of closed-mindedness is so strong that we're at the point where we not only reject other opinions, we resent them. And we need to reach a stage in life where we're not resenting what another person has to say. I want to turn the discussion a little bit of or continue it, but a little bit a different direction. I know that time is running short. Several months ago, I participated in a webinar that was sponsored by a Jewish organization, but it was with one of the leaders of the NAACP. And at a certain point, toward the middle of the conversation, the Jewish moderator addressed her question, prefaced her question by saying, "This is not going to be an easy question." And then she began to ask a question which was something of great concern, I know, to the Jewish community. What impressed me about the response given, and I apologize, I forgot the name of this NAACP individual. What impressed me most about what he said was, we need to ask the difficult questions. He thanked the moderator for posing this somewhat provocative question, but said, if we don't ask the difficult questions, we cannot get past this initial stage. We have to be able to face one another and ask those questions, which at times might be controversial or confrontational, but they need to be asked so that we can have progress in the area of dialogue. So I want to ask everyone here on this discussion, if you had to think of one important question that needs to be asked, a question that we are not asking, but which has to be asked and has to be discussed by our community, seeing it from your perspective, what is that one question? What's the difficult question, or a difficult question that we need to ask if we are going to, at any point, reach the stage where we have some semblance of unity amongst ourselves? I'm going to start with the Nassau County Executive.
Well, this is such a great conversation, and I'm getting so much from everyone who is speaking. I'm really grateful to be part of this conversation. One word that comes up a lot is respect. And I think if I was in the position to ask people a challenging, difficult question, it would be, can you look yourself in the mirror and say that you respect yourself? We've all done things that we're ashamed of in our lives. We've all made mistakes. We've all been terrible to someone. We've all been the brunt of someone being terrible to us. But can you look yourself in the eye and say that you forgive yourself and that you respect yourself? And I think if you can do that, you can respect others. Or maybe it's the other way around, as I'm just making this up as I go along. If you can truly respect other people, then maybe you can look yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and say, I respect myself. I think that is the, we're all going to disagree. This is not a communist country. It's a wonderful thing. There's a diversity in ethnicity and race and sexuality. There's also a diversity in opinion. That's not a bad thing. If we were all marching in lockstep with all the same opinions, it wouldn't be very fun. But at the end of the day, can you have that disagreement and have it be respectful? Can you have that difficult conversation and have it be respectful? It all comes down to that. So that would be my challenging question. Can you look yourself in the eye, in the mirror, as corny as that feels, and say, I respect you. I respect myself. And I'll just say one more thing before I pass it along. Someone was saying, I think it was Erica talking about keyboard warriors. I go on the internet, I go on social media. I have social media accounts for politics and government and everything else. And once in a while, just when I want to torture myself, I'll read the comments. And then and people are, they'll say anything, whatever, it's fine. But then I go out in the real world and I don't know who these people are. They don't talk to me. I don't see them. People are generally kind and polite. So to me, is there some lack of self-respect behind that? The fact that you have to just lash out? I don't know. So that's my provocative question for the night.
Ms. Supervisor.
Yes, Rabbi. So I'm going to take this in a bit of a different direction, because it's something that I think, because of all the protests that we've seen over the summer, and I think it can't just be that those protests took place and they're no longer on people's minds. I think we need to really search and think about the systemic racism that has been discussed for so many months, and to actually look deep into ourselves and see if we can understand where there is systemic racism, but not just understand where there is systemic racism, but try to come to terms with what we can do about it. And so, when Andre said something about it's not just about going to holidays and parties, and of course it's important. It's important to understand each other's cultures and celebrations, and that's such a wonderful first step. But we need to get beyond the surface things and really look deep into the issues that are facing our society. And until we're able to address systemic racism, I think we're going to see the kind of divide that we've been seeing.
So true. So true. Legislator Birnbaum?
This is a very good question. And considering this was just a presidential election year, I think the question I would want to ask is, what is your biggest fear? Because I'm often curious, what do people fear most? Is it their own pocketbook? Is it an economic reason behind something? In COVID days, is it their health? Is it something more within their own family, a mental issue? There's a lot of fear that I think is underlying in what these problems are, fearing other people, fearing change, climate change even. I mean, there's so much now, and with this argument about science, fake news, people not knowing what to believe, I often get curious about what is it? What is that central motivation? What is it that they fear? So that's what I would want to know.
Thanks. Okay, Andre, then Rebecca, and Jane, and Erica.
Oh, well, it would be a lengthy question, but are you willing to sacrifice, be uncomfortable, and change the narrative that you were taught? Because, like I mentioned before, we're carrying on narratives that aren't our own. I don't understand why we expect this to be comfortable. If you were working out for the first time with a trainer, your body would probably hurt after that. And the problem is that people don't continue with these conversations. So when you take time off and you start again, the same pains will remain. when you start over again. The only way is for there to be consistency, for there to be to push yourselves outside of your comfort zone and be willing to take, I know Rebecca mentioned earlier, the backlash is a part of the journey. So stepping into other people's shoes, going to their environments. I know that as a child growing up in Manhasset, I attended many other people's houses, but I can say that I didn't have any friends, from the outside community come and visit my house to see how I was living, to truly understand what was going on in my environment, because there's an assumption that there's a better place over there. But as I understood, what really creates a safe and happy home is not materialistic things. So the discomfort is going to be necessary, but people have to look into the mirror, because the hard thing is that the honest truth about all our cultures, when people learn, means that you're going to have to take accountability for your actions. It's going to change the narratives and the stories that you grew up with, or your biases towards people and how you treat it. And we have to accept that we all are a part of the problem in some way, but we all can contribute to the solution.
Rebecca.
That was great, Andre.
Yes.
These are great provocative questions, and my mind is just spinning. So thank you all. I think my provocative question would be, what do you still have faith in? What do you believe in? Because at this point, I think that there's been such an erosion of confidence, and now you could fill in the blank, in the United States Supreme Court as a just arbiter of law, in the presidency, in schools, in educators, in attorneys. I'm a practicing attorney, in any authority figure whatsoever, frankly. And of course, one could also say that there's an erosion of faith in God, and in people's willingness to engage in a spiritual life. So that's not my area, but I think across the board, we can say that there's been an erosion of affiliation and tethering to any entity, because so many of these entities have just let people down. And until people, I think, could find faith outside of themselves, and by faith, I mean trust. As long as we continue to have such a high level of distrust, we won't be able to see our way forward, because what Andre was talking about, that discomfort, that stretching that needs to happen, it's necessary. But for people who are so closed off and afraid, as Ellen was just saying, if the fear dominates, then you're just going to retreat and probably just go back to being a keyboard warrior. And of course, that's not desirable. I mean, we have adults now writing things that kids get suspended for in school. It's been, being an adult has been turned on its head. It used to be that the adults would be the ones who would, know best and would have their institutions that they would speak for, right? So come to my lodge, come to the Boy Scouts, come to the church, come to the synagogue, whatever the institutions are. And I think that what we've seen is a wholesale abandonment of that belief in something greater outside of ourselves. And so that would be my question. What do you still believe in?
Jane.
So it's a very good question. I'm also thinking about what to ask. I think in my mind is do you think people could be all the same? It's sure not. It's not just a country or community. Even in a family, we are not the same. I'm not the same with husband or in-laws or with kids. We all have difference. In my philosophy is a family is like a country. A country is like a family. What brings us together? why we live here. We choose to be together. For family, yes, we love each other. So we have all the different opinion, but yes, we have love. So I can tolerate this difference. We can talk, we can communicate, we can draw a conclusion. So even if a family member could be different, how can you ask people all agree with you? It's impossible. Then what makes you to want to stay in the community? I think this is something like, what are we in common? We are not just look at what we are different, and we also look at what we are in common. Like we live in Great Neck, we mostly for the kids' education, they have great school district. We also want to have a safe neighborhood. We want to be respected. This is all what we are in common. We probably have different religions, we have all the different education, we're from all the different culture. That doesn't matter, but always want to have the same good education, safety neighborhood, and respect, and to be respected. So this is something based on that. Then we work on the next step. So if we are pushing each other to say, you have to agree with me, it's just impossible. Like even for myself, I don't agree with myself like 10 years ago. When I was young, I think things differently. Now I think, oh, I was wrong at that time. Now I change. So nobody is perfect. You cannot say, oh, I'm totally right, so the other side is totally wrong. It's not. We all want the country to be good. We all want the community to be good. So we have to think, maybe part of your word is correct, part of my word is correct. We have to work together to build all our good part together. We cannot say, oh, all my good are good, all yours are bad. It's just not reality. I think when people are getting angry to yelling to each other, it's something like they magnify the single part to be like whole life. Now we have to like case by case to talk. Okay, we have this happen. It's not taking like, oh, you are all totally bad. Let's talk about this opinion. Maybe I'm right, maybe you're right, but let's discuss it. Yelling to each other never can draw any conclusion. So I just feel like people think, is it possible everybody to be the same? Or any of you is perfect, never have problem, never think things wrong? It's not. So just don't make a judgment too fast. Then sit together and talk, just like family member. We have common interest. So from that, we can move to the next.
Beautiful. I appreciate the fact you spoke about growth and maturity in our own thinking. I mentioned in the past, one of my heroes is Robert Kennedy. And one of the reasons he became a hero was that his thinking evolved, not only in a political sense, but as a human being. When he came from an affluent, comfortable family, but when he went out into the world, into the country, when he went to communities in Mississippi and elsewhere, and he saw a different aspect of life, it totally changed his personality. And that's what I always admired about someone like him. And I've met some of his children who have spent a lifetime, whether it's down in Texas working with immigrant families or elsewhere working with impoverished children, wherever it may be, they've grown, and his legacy, I think, was something inculcated in all of his children. We need to grow. We can't remain the same, and I think that's the same thing with our organizations. Whether it be houses of faith, or whether it be political organizations, educational organizations, we have to grow. We have to develop. We preserve what is positive and effective, but we need to be able to open up to more people, to more ideas. And I thank you for raising that. Erica, last but not least.
Thanks. So I would ask, how truly accepting do you think that you are? If I said I just was outside and the stars are out, would you believe me? Would you accept that answer? probably yes, right? So why wouldn't you accept that Andre feels that he has bias, he's biased against, he's subject to prejudice if he tells you that? Why won't you accept that the Asian community is saying that they're being bullied because of the coronavirus? Acceptance is really important. If my child has depression or anxiety and they're telling me that they're having trouble sleeping at night because they're afraid of somebody breaking in, I'm not questioning that. I'm not saying that's silly. I don't understand it. I don't think that there's going to be anybody breaking in, but I'm going to comfort them and I'm going to accept that that's their problem. That's a true fear. That's a true concern for them. And I'm going to take care of that. And I feel like that's missing. There's compassion missing here. There's no way that I could understand what Andre is going through. Can't understand what Jane is going through. I don't know. I'm just me, but I accept it. Accept that there are these things going on and I'm willing to try to change. And I think that that's missing. I think that people don't truly want to hear or accept that these things are going on in the community. And once a little bit more acceptance comes about, then I think that that's where change is gonna happen. But if you're not accepting, you don't accept that this is an issue, if you don't accept that that's how these people are truly feeling, then how can the change occur? I don't know.
It's giving people a sense of validation. It's validating their feelings, their sentiments. We don't have to agree, but we need to recognize their pain, their concern, and all of their sentiments.
Yeah, I mean, you could be like, I don't get it, but okay, I don't have to get it. It's not my job to get it. It's my job to accept that that's how they feel. It's my job to accept that that's what's going on in their community. And let me see if I could help make a change. I don't have to get it. I don't have to understand it. That's not what this is about. You know, it's about accepting that this is happening and then trying to help make a change.
You remind me of, I remember when Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat met to, they negotiated a peace agreement. And I remember that Rabin made a comment to the effect of, we don't always make peace just with our friends. We have to make peace with our enemies. I think what he was suggesting is that we don't embrace other people immediately. We have to acknowledge them. We have to validate their concerns. We have to recognize their pain. That's the first step. That's where the tolerance comes in and the flexibility. And I think what Rabin was saying is that we've got to be able to live. We have to coexist. And the only way to coexist is by learning how to make peace with one another. I want to conclude just with a comment, a teaching actually that I've shared before, because I think it applies to all aspects of this conversation. There were two, in Rabbinic Judaism in antiquity, there were two schools of thought. One was headed by a rabbi whose name was Hillel, and the other one was Shammai. They were the two great rabbinic figures of their time. And our rabbinic tradition, our literature teaches that whenever the students in the school of Hillel would sit down to deliberate an issue, they would first discuss and understand what the opinion of Shammai represented. Before they sat to offer their own comments, their own thoughts, their own thinking, they wanted to know what the other school thought. Even if they disagreed, even if there were conflicts, they needed to have an understanding and a respect for that other school first. That's what I envision, being a community of Hillel and Shammai, of people who don't necessarily have to agree, but we learn from one another, we listen to one another, and we're willing to grow. But we can only do so if we take that opportunity to hear somebody else's story. I want to thank Erica and North Shore TV, as always, for offering us this tremendous opportunity, this forum. This, again, is just the beginning. But I want to thank you all for your conversation and for your candor. And if we've brought our community just 1 minute closer to peace, then I think we've succeeded. So thank you all very much.